This is the Flipboard session on sustainable enterprise development. We're going to talk about the major challenges that companies are facing when they're doing enterprise development by looking at a simple example of how you would do enterprise development with a street trader. And from there, obviously, you can expand it up into any size business as well, just to understand why it is that you need to do a sustainable enterprise development program. Let's start with an example of a street. Here's a street, could be your home street. And on that street, there's your house. And you're looking out your window at the street, and on the other side of the street, you find three people who are traders. One of them is selling apples, the other one is selling oranges, and the final one is selling tomatoes. So we now have three people who are identified as being entrepreneurs that you can see. The question is, which one of these do you support? You have 100 Rand, which is available to you to spend and to help one of these entrepreneurs, but which one do you spend? And when I ask this question in some of the workshops I run, a lot of people say apples because I really like to eat apples, or oranges because oranges taste good, or tomatoes because there's seasonality and they can maybe sell faster in the next 4 months and make more money. And people come up with any form of a reason to support one of these because of personal reasons. The real answer about selecting a beneficiary is to identify the market. That means that you would go to your neighbors and you would speak to your neighbors about which of these three items they might buy more of. If they will buy more oranges, that means there's a potential additional market for oranges, which means that might be the beneficiary to support. In this case, you run next door to your neighbors and find out that these guys would buy more tomatoes, these guys would buy more tomatoes, and so would these. You've got 4 neighbors that would buy more tomatoes, and you could buy more tomatoes too. In looking at the market and understanding the market needs, you've identified that there is actually an additional market for the tomato seller. And in doing that, you've just limited the chance of failure, because if you'd given the 100 Rand to the oranges or the apples, they would have grown their business, they would have maybe bought more stock, but they wouldn't have been able to sell it because there was no market. Number 1 point, identify the market. Number 2, when you're speaking to the beneficiary, you've got to be very careful about how you do that and that engagement. So here you are with your 100 Rand, and you walk across to now say, listen, Mr. Beneficiary, I've identified that tomatoes are definitely a growing product. I've spoken to my neighbors and they would all buy more tomatoes from you, but how do I support you? Because at the moment, just like all of the other guys who are trading on the street, they all have one box of products that they're selling, and they sell that box every single day. So everyone sells the same amount, but you've got a potential to sell more. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you 100 Rand. Now, if we give this guy 100 Rand, he goes away that night, and by the way, it costs 100 Rand to buy a box of tomatoes, and at the end of that day, he actually makes 50 Rand. So he walks out with 150 Rand. The 50 Rand, by the way, is used for transport, for his home costs and living, if he pays rent, whatever it is, and maybe some food as well. So that when he comes the next day, he comes back with 100 Rand to buy another box. And then he sells that box that day and makes 150, and then he uses the 50 for living and then buys the box again with the 100. So this person is very much on a survivalist basis and very happy about how he's trading. So if we give this person 100 Rand extra, he's going to go home with 250 Rand. If he goes home with 250 Rand, and you're hoping one day that he's going to come back with the 250 Rand and end up with 2 boxes, which would be 100 and 100 Rand, and use 50 Rand for his living, I'm afraid to say most of these beneficiaries don't do that. He goes away with 250 Rand, he goes to the pub that night, or the bar, or the shebeen, and he spends that 100 Rand on drinks. And he comes the next day with just 1 box of tomatoes and a headache. So we've got to make sure that we help this entrepreneur not just with money, but with additional support. Help them to understand how to grow their business. So instead of going and giving this person the money, what we would do is find the wholesaler that he buys from and offer to go with him to the wholesaler where this wholesaler is selling all this wonderful fruit, and we would offer to buy 2 boxes of tomatoes, one with our 100 rand and one with his 100 rand. Now he ends up on the street with 2 boxes, and because he's made a link with the market and we've helped him do that, he actually sells 2 boxes. So at the end of the day, he actually makes 300 rand. He's made 300 rand now. If we let him go away that night with 300 rand, he's going to come back the next day with 1 box of tomatoes and the biggest headache he's ever had. But he's back to where he was before. So we've got to make sure that we help him to get past that phase. So what we would do is normally say, at the end of your day's trade, we are going to take the 100 rand back. Please come back and bring it back to us, and you can go off with the rest of your money, your 200 rand. So well done, you've made an extra 50 rand as a result of our help. And the next morning, come to us again, and we will come and buy the extra box of tomatoes with you. So what you're doing is you're putting some kind of structure into your support program. You're saying, instead of giving money, you're saying, let's help you to spend this money effectively. Now what happens is, over time, he ends up understanding that there is a benefit to selling 2 boxes of tomatoes, and that he's actually walking away with 100 rand extra as a result of this extra box. And he's got a client base who's buying from him. And that time he needs to start to get his head around how to manage more money than he's ever had before. He needs a framework or a space in which to start to understand that actually having 2 boxes of tomatoes is better than having 1 and a headache. And over time he'll get into that. But now the question is, what has he learned? Through this process, we've actually educated this person. This is meant to be one of your scholarly hats. We've now educated this person on how to manage a business better, how to manage money better, because we put a good program in place. And that process is what we start to talk about as sustainable enterprise development. Not just loans, not just money, but it's the support that goes with it. We're actually creating entrepreneurs and business managers with enterprise development who can grow businesses and create jobs, as opposed to just giving money. And that's a really important difference that we have to get in our heads when we're doing our programs, no matter what the size is. This is just an example using a street vendor, but if you were to use it in any other context, it still applies. And what that means is, if we learn from this, it means that every program should have 4 elements to it. So here's an enterprise development program. What we need to do is make sure that we have funding in place. If we don't have money to support the guys, they must have some form of access to funding, because to grow a business, you do need money. Then you need a program management, because without the management of the program, like we saw, the beneficiary is not likely to get the benefit from it. It must be managed well, must be looked after well. Then we have an element called support. And the support is essential. That's the thing that takes this beneficiary and it makes him or her into a more knowledgeable person. This is your training, your coaching, any form of systems, anything that you can give the person over and above funding to help them to run their business better. And the most important thing is a market. You've got to identify if there's a market for the business before you grow them. If you don't identify the market, you're doing all of this for nothing. You're literally replacing someone else's business with this business, and you're killing a job to create a job. This is a very, very important element. We must identify that there is a potential market for the growth of this business, and only if there is a potential market should we invest in the business. That is sustainable enterprise development. 4 elements to make sure that it's working very, very well.